The new book from Brother Willie Muhammad is titled The Journey to Get the Love You Desire Begins with You. And Brother Willie Muhammad, welcome back. How have you been?
Fine, by God's grace. And once again, thank you for this opportunity.
It's our pleasure. And this book grew out of requests from persons for you to actually write a book. Tell us about this.
And in my conversations with people, just about always with the intent to inspire people to be the best that they can be. Of course, relationships play a big part in our lives. So I will share with them what I'm personally learning, what I've learned from my mistakes, and stuff that I've read. And in our conversations, people would make the statement, say, "Man, you know something? You need to write a book." And I would think about it and laugh about it. But one time after seeing Steve Harvey last year at an event that he had with all men, he talked about a vision, creating a vision board. And I created a vision board, and I just said, "Man, you know something? Let me start on this book." And I finished it within maybe a couple of days.
That's something when you decide that there's something that you're going to do, you just really put that focus to it and get it done. Certainly. Well, let's go to chapter 1 of the book. It's titled, Let's Be Honest. And I'll open up here and read this excerpt here. It says, "When I met my wife, I was able to clearly express my wish for honesty because I had been actively involved in a process that allowed me to fix what was wrong with me." Talk to us about that.
Right. From trial and error and pain and hurt, I realized that if I wanted to avoid that same type of experience, those same type of experiences from continuing in my life, especially as it relates to relationships, in all relationships, I had to begin to start being honest. So I made a conscious decision to be honest in my thinking, be honest in my actions, and even in my words. So when my wife and I first started what we would say courting, that was one of the first things that I asked, let's be honest. Oftentimes we come into relationships and people are afraid to really be their authentic selves, right? So if a person wants someone to begin to love them for them or take an interest in them for them, then how can they do so if we're not being honest about our likes, about our dislikes, and even about what we want out of a relationship and out of our own lives?
Well, that brings up the next question here, because in this chapter you also pose a few questions and you also have some exercises for readers in order to get to honesty. And so give us an overview of those.
Right. Well, basically, it's for the person to do a brutally honest assessment with themselves. And we ask them to think about some people who we all have a few friends or relatives who they will tell you the truth no matter what. So we ask them to think about some people who they know that are like that and just contact them and ask them to share their assessment of us or the person who's reading a book and as it relates to honesty. And we should just sit back and really listen and see what they have to say and see how much of it is real and how much of it may not be real, but at least do an honest assessment, because if we can't be honest with ourselves, we're not going to be honest with many people. And I've several people who have been given this book, who have purchased the book. Many of them have not, still to this day, they haven't made it past the first chapter. And I was talking to someone and she said that she was doing the activities, and there's a part in the activities where I say after you write down what you write in your journal, just step outside, get some fresh air, and come back and read it. And she said after reading it, she realized that even in writing a journal that was just for her to read, she still was holding back. And I asked her the question, well, what do you think is the cause? Because if you can't be honest with yourself and writing a journal that only you will see more than likely, then what else? Then in what other areas in your lives are you not being honest, and especially as it relates to relationships?
And so honesty, again, that's the first step. That's the cleansing.
That's the key. That's the key part. And as we say, the journey to get the love you desire begins with you. A lot of times in relationship books that I've read and even talks that I've heard, a lot of attention is placed on the other person. And there should be some attention placed on them, but the greatest battle is with us, because the more work we do on ourselves, I feel it allows us to give us clearer vision and clarity on others, so we can begin to start knowing what we want as a person and what we're not going to tolerate, so we can begin to limit the amount of energy we waste in these relationships, one toxic relationship after another.
Once again, our guest is Brother Willie Muhammad, chatting about his brand new book titled The Journey to Get the Love You Desire begins with you. And apples don't fall far from the tree. That's the title of chapter 2.
Yes.
And in this particular chapter, you address various relationships. You have father and daughter, father and son, mother and son. Talk to us about those dynamics and their impacts on relationships.
They are so key. And with the numerous amount of research that's on how a relationship between a father and his daughter, or a daughter and her father, a mother and son, how researchers are saying that your relationship with your parents or lack of relationships influence your decisions when your romantic relationships that you become involved in. So in that book, which I think is one of my favorite chapters, I'm asking the reader to go and assess and just to reflect on their relationship or lack of relationship with their father or with their mother. And as it says in the book, sometimes the things that we've observed from the relationships our mothers may have been involved in, or fathers may have been involved in, their relationships together, it impacts us. A gentleman who I was talking to in the process when I was just doing the final drafts of the book, he shared with me how once growing up, he realized that some of his negative views of women came from environments that his mother had him in. And he said that growing up, his mother would always hang with other women who basically manipulated men. And he said that it wasn't until he became an adult and began to start assessing his relationships that he realized that he was impacted by that. When they talk about in the chapter about the significance of the relationship of the father and the daughter, I have 2 daughters, and the research is amazing. That it says the impact that it has. I quote one of the articles, and it talks about I can't think of the exact article right now, but it talks about a daughter's relationship with their father. And I've talked to people, and I asked them when they're engaged in these relationships with people, how much time is spent investigating or questioning their potential mate or their current boyfriend or girlfriend about their relationship with their father or their mother. And many of them say that that was an area that they never really dealt with. And sometimes they didn't deal with it because in dealing with asking somebody else about that, it will force them to analyze their own. So it's a very key area that many people overlook. And researchers also shows that oftentimes we end up picking, not all of the times, we end up picking someone that's like our mother or like our father in some way, shape, or kind.
Once again, our guest is Brother Willie Muhammad. And I'm glad you brought that up because, as you know, my wife is a social worker, and thank God for her. Very early in our relationship, she talked to me about the whole father and daughter relationship because we do have 2 daughters as well. And so just those conversations with her from her professional from her professional life really, really helped me consciously try to always work to improve the relationships that I have with my daughters.
Yes, and it's so needed. And I can, when you look at, for example, I watch Ayanna Van Zant's show a lot. And when she's dealing with a lot of the females that she's working with, at some way, shape, or form, it always comes back to the relationship or the lack of relationship they had with their father.
Looking for daddy. She says it quite often, yes.
And it's like that. And, we run from pain. But as I said, if we want to get the love that we desire, we have to look into this area because we may find out that some of the causes that are disrupting or causing a failure of some of our relationships, it stems from wounds that have not been healed from our relationships with our fathers and our mothers.
And you hear the same thing from men as well.
And men as well. And personally, I think about how I grew up, and my father, I think, had the best intentions. Sometimes as a child, he would promise to take me places, and he would come home tired from work, and he wouldn't take me. And he would promise certain things. And as a child, it left a bitter taste in my mouth, where it made me say, when I get older, I want to make sure that I promise to keep my word when I give it to people. But it also created in me a dislike for people who break their word. If somebody told me they were going to do something and they disappoint, and it was a form of disappointment. And I realized that, man, that happened. That response to those circumstances came from my relationship with my father. So I had to look into that. I had to heal in that area. And I don't know if I mentioned it in the book. I grew up in a family where many of my uncles and my aunts, none of them were with the male or female that they had children or gave someone produced children for them. And as a teenager, no one ever came to me and said marriage is not for you. But as I observed what was around me, I said, oh, marriage is not for me and for my family, so therefore I'm not going to get married. So just from the examples that I saw, it shaped my view. It gave me a negative view of marriage, and I had to go back and address that. And it's all into those relationships, those relationships, but we have to have the courage to go there and examine them.
Brother Muhammad, let's move to chapter 3. It's titled, What I Did or Failed to Do. Right. And it opens with this. It says, one of the things I did to prepare myself for my future wife was to do a self-assessment of my actions or non-actions in my past relationships. I specified future wife because at that point I had determined that I had had enough of the boyfriend-girlfriend game and I wanted to have a long-term relationship.
Yes. There's a principle that I strive to live my life on. Self-improvement is the basis of community development. So if I want my community to develop, it starts with me as an individual. So what I did, as I mentioned it in the book, and I asked the readers to do this actual exercise, is that I sat down and I wrote all of the relationships that I had been in, not the elementary puppy love, passing the letters. And I wrote the name of that person who I was in a relationship with and how that relationship ended. But I also wrote why it ended. But then I added what was my action or non-action that caused it to end. What was my thinking? And as I reviewed that list, I had to sit down and ask myself, is any of this still in me? And if it was, I knew I had to begin to start working on it, because if I didn't, I would bring that same thinking, those same actions into this new relationship. And I didn't want that. And it was a painful process. There were some people that I saw, and I mentioned in a book, where I saw one young lady, and I must have saw her maybe 5 times, but every time I saw her, I kept apologizing until she said, you don't have to apologize anymore. So that was healing for me. And as it relates to that, what did I do and what I didn't do? Sometimes people will say, well, he cheated on me, or she cheated on me, or he didn't do this, or she didn't do that. And they very may well have done those things. But my question, and I had to ask this to myself, what was in me that allowed me to accept that type of treatment? And it brought me to have to address my self-worth. And as I was mentioning, I started with the video blogging, and that was the first blog that we addressed, talking about self-worth, because oftentimes it's our self-worth that determines what we're going to tolerate or what we're not going to tolerate. So I had to look into that. There were some things that I may have not violated the laws of the relationship in one sense, but I may have violated the laws of the relationship by not standing up for something that was right, not from setting a standard to say this is a type of treatment that I will not accept. And so the whole aim of this book is to get people to see, look within yourself, deal with that stuff, clean out those clauses, do that work, and in doing that work, it will put us in a better position to make a better choice when we meet the next person in our life. And it'll open us up. We'll have a better understanding of ourselves.
Earlier, you mentioned the subject of cheating, and so let's go on and go to chapter 4 of your book, and this chapter is titled, History Repeats Itself for Those Who Do Not Learn Its Lessons. And let me go here to page 29, and yes, I found this to be quite interesting. It says here, often men are involved with multiple women at one time. I have found that men often do this as a form of self-preservation. We use these multiple women as a way to keep us from investing all of our emotions, cares, and concerns in one woman.
I've noticed in my experience of men who do that, one of the reasons that they're afraid to get hurt. So in their minds, they feel that if I have several women, and that way I would never invest all of my love in one. Well, that's impossible. Out of you, if you have 7, there'll be one that you're going to love more than the other remaining 6. but at the root of it is someone that's afraid, you know. And there's nothing that we can do to prevent ourselves from from the possibility of being hurt in a relationship. That's just part of life, right? But we shouldn't, as a way to run from that, we shouldn't run from that by having other multiple relationships, because we're causing hurt in the lives of other young ladies, you know. So in that area of the book, it's just really telling the men to, let's look at it. There are other reasons as well. We look in a society where you may have a young boy who grows up, he's never given praise at school. He may grow up in a single parent household where his mother never gives him praise and, you know, adoration and stuff like that. But then as he begins to be a teenager, when he's able to manipulate the emotions of young women, then when he comes back into his neighborhood, he's given such titles as he's a player, he's a Mac. Now he's able to sit in the barbershop and everybody wants to hear what he has to say. So now what does that do? It feeds a sick behavior.
And I wanted to bring that up because as you sort of look at society, and again, here we are talking about being honest here, society sort of not necessarily tolerates that type of behavior from men, but oftentimes it's promoted.
It's promoted. It's promoted. When you look at, for example, the reality shows, it took several years before they ever came out with a Bachelorette. Many of them was about the Bachelor, and here's this one man who has several women that's trying to get his attention. And what does he do? He sleeps with whatever ones which he knows in his mind he's not interested, but he uses them up until he gets the one that he feels that he wants. And most of the time, the one that he selects, they never go on and get married. But we live in a society that, of course, with sexism and things like this, where it encourages that, it praises that. When you look at like the movie James Bond, you know, in a movie, he's sleeping with several women. But that aspect he's never looked at as a man that's immoral, a man that's not, he doesn't have any issues. But that's not the right example. So look at the context where you have in the black community, majority of our homes are headed by women, right? And so you have young men that are growing up don't have any like examples for the most part. So they turn to rap music, which is promoting the same theme. They look at television, which is promoting the same theme. And some of them that sit at home watching soap operas is promoting the same message. And so you have this young boy they grow up to be males, but they're really young boys in the inside who are afraid to take the chance on love.
And while, of course, we cannot stop all of the outside influences, because if we're all being honest, outside influences play a big role in a lot of our decision-making and what have you. So as I believe you're saying in the book, it's important for us to really take care of those things that we can take care of within our own confines.
That's it. When you think about it, you know, some people spend a large amount of their time trying to control others. And when you really look at it, we really don't have any control of others. You know, any control that we may think we have, the person has basically allowed it to some degree. But the number one person that we do have complete control over us for the most part is us. And so that's why throughout this book, I'm focusing on putting the microscope back to us. Let's do the work, because we can get into a habit of blaming everything on everybody else. You know, I know several people who have been divorced more than 2-3 times. And the people that they divorced, they went on now, they're in happy marriages. But this person is still single. So at some point, we have to look at how can these people, I go through a divorce, they go on and get married, but I'm still by myself in the same condition. At some point, that's a sign to say, I need to look at me. And that's one of the areas that we run from. That the greatest battle is that battle to deal with ourselves. But if we do that, then there's a reward on the other end. And we come into real contact with who we are.
Once again, Brother Willie Muhammad is on Sunday Journal talking about his brand new book titled The Journey to Get the Love You Desire Begins With You. And let's move to chapter 5, which is simply titled Baggage, and begins with you sharing experiences of interviewing married couples. And one of the spouses actually mentioned the term baggage. Tell us about that.
Right. And she said something that was so significant. She said that when you meet the right person, they can carry your baggage, right? And so that's that, and that connects back to chapter 1 about being honest. You know, when I first began to start courting my wife, I let her know these are my strengths, these are my areas of improvement. So I wanted, when she made a decision, when I made a decision, we both knew what we were bringing to the table, the good, the bad, and the actual and the ugly. You know, and so, but so many people get into relationships and they hide that. So then they get into a relationship and some time passes and the person wakes up and say, well, who is this person? When it was really always this person, but they were hiding the baggage. And my thing is, we none of us are perfect, right? So just be honest, and if it's the right person, then they'll understand, and they're made to actually to accommodate you in those areas, and maybe be able to pull on us in those areas where we would improve in those areas. But if we are afraid to first honestly accept our own pluses and our own minuses, then we're never going to show the real me or the real you or the real us to the person that we're interested in, and they make a decision based upon somebody that is not the real us.
In the book, you sort of list some of the things that sort of constitute baggage. Give us some examples about baggage.
You know, sometimes baggage can be, I know one thing that I thought I was thinking about. There was a situation of a couple that had some health issues, right? And a person, they had an STD, and it's just real.
Yeah.
And they honestly opened up to a person, and they went through this period of being afraid. What if I tell her this? What if I tell him this? What's going to happen? And the people, they were able to make a decision, and they accepted it. You know, I know some people that have for some time hid the fact that they had children. You know, and it's like, come on, if you want them to accept who you are, bad credit, you know, what's their finances? You can have, sometimes people will put on this facade like they have a lot of money and they don't. You know, lack of education. Some people can falsify their educational accomplishments, and then the person marries them and find out, well, wait a minute, you didn't really graduate from this school. Or it can be family history. You know, I have a mother or a father who has mental issues, or whatever it may be, health issues. You know, all of those things that make us who we are. That's some of the baggage that we have. And sometimes it can, and depending on our level of development, some of that baggage can be, I have trust issues, or I have a bad relationship with my mother, or something, you know, different things like that.
Brother Muhammad, after reading the book, tell us about some of the final activities you asked readers to engage in.
Wow. One of the activities is to go and assess and look at their relationship history, as I talked about that. The other one of the activities is also to do an honest assessment to see where they are honestly, see if they can be honest with themselves. There's a part in the book where I ask them to write down also what they feel that they want in a relationship. You know, I heard somebody say you get what you aim for, and sometimes we go into relationships outside of, he has to have a nice house, he has to have a nice car, he has to be handsome, or she has to be her shapely body-wise. Some people don't go past that in determining what they want. So they enter into these relationships having no idea. And I mentioned in one chapter, I heard the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan use this example. He used the mathematics. And he said, if you are a 2 and you're using multiplication and you want to get to a 10, he said, if you know multiplication, you have to multiply the 2 times the 5. But he said, if you don't know you're a 2, you may multiply the 2 times the 10 and you get 20. You know what I'm saying? Instead of what it is, whatever it is that you want. And there's an activity in the book to get the people to really analyze who they are, what do they want, what do they need, and to balance them. When we understand who we are, we can have a better opportunity of selecting our mate and who we feel that we need that can help us in this journey to get the love we desire.
And speaking of needs, I believe in the book you sort of mentioned one of the things that your wife was looking for in a mate. She wanted somebody who was tall, and
that's one of the things too. You know, I read an article where they did a study. It was an experiment where they asked people to write down what they say they wanted, and of course, people had these long, drawn-out lists. And then they did like a little speed dating, and when it came time to select, the person that they select really didn't have many of the the characteristics or the qualities.
And I like how your wife sort of twisted it around there. She said, okay, while he's not tall, he's the tallest man
Oh yeah,
I know.
I felt that was one of the biggest compliments she gave me. And she had an idea in her mind. She wanted somebody that was tall, you know, and I'm far from tall. And I had an idea in my mind. My wife is some years older than me, you know, so but when I looked at it, I saw the qualities that I wanted in a woman, in her, primarily her character. And so there were some things where we had to look at our list and say, that's important, but it's all not that important. But there are some people that I've talked to who would say, he's not light enough, he's not dark-skinned enough, or his hair is not wavy enough. And it's like these things are, he's a little bit overweight. These are things that we can really work out. And I think in the book, I'm trying to get people to really get to the very core things that we want to build a relationship on. And one of the things is character. I mentioned in the book how I've noticed with women, some women, they focus more on the carrot of the ring than the character of the man. And I noticed that some men focus more on the curviness of the woman instead of the character. So we get a person who has, she may resemble, she may look like Beyonce, or we get somebody who has the money like a Jay-Z, but then they don't have the character to stay, yeah, I know I have money, yeah, I know I look this way, but I'm in a committed relationship. And many people overlook that, and because there's societal pressures, whereas it's tell us to to be more caught up into the outer appearance instead of the things that really keep a relationship together.
The new book from Brother Willie Muhammad is titled "The Journey to Get the Love You Desire Begins with You." How may listeners get the book and also reach out to you?
If they want to reach out to me, first they can do that by email, and my email is BROWM46@iCloud.com. And I'm also on Facebook as Willie Muhammad, and I'm also on, you can reach me out on Twitter as well. And Twitter is BROWM46. And if you want to get the book, you can actually order it from off of Amazon. If you're from New Orleans and you see me, you can pick it up from our mosque at 4201 Downman Road as well if you want to get a copy of the book. It's a very thin book, but if you're serious about wanting to get the love you desire, I believe it's the right book for those people who are ready to do the work. Because there's a part in the opening where I talk about how the word, and you see the word patient, like when you go to the doctor, there's a patient in the hospital. But it's interesting, in that word patient, I see the word patience. And sometimes we don't have the patience to do the work. We want results fast. And nothing of real value comes fast. So if the person is ready to do this work, I think this is the book for them.
Amazon.com. They can reach you via email at BROWM46@iCloud.com.
iCloud.
Any local bookstores just yet?
And our bookstore at our mosque.
At the mosque, yes.
4201 Downman Road. That's, again, you can get it there. And if they reach out to me, Facebook and the email, you can get a copy of it as well, too. And I'll be sending out messages about some workshops that we're going to start doing. And as I mentioned, I've already released 2 video blogs on YouTube. So just type in Willie Muhammad, Getting the Love You Desire. The first one is on the importance of self-worth in a relationship. And the second one is on preparation. And it talks about the preparation that I actually did to prepare myself to be with the woman I've been with for the last going on 15 years in this December, and I'm happily married.
All right, Brother Willie Muhammad, thanks so much.
Thank you too.